The sun was setting on the barren alien landscape, casting long shadows across the cracked ground. A hot wind whispered through the desolation, stirring the loose dust in the air. It was a world forgotten by time, a world where life struggled to survive against the harsh conditions. And yet it was here, in this hostile place, that a desperate plea was about to be made, a plea that would change the course of fate. In the distance, a figure appeared. A young alien girl, no older than 16, was running towards a human, a stranger who had landed on her planet by chance. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her heart pounding in her chest as she ran faster, driven by fear and hope. She had no choice. Her mother's life depended on it. Tears streaked down her pale, silver face as she finally reached the human. His face was unfamiliar, his eyes filled with confusion and uncertainty. He had no idea who she was or what was happening, but she knew. She knew that he was her only hope. She stopped in front of him, out of breath, her hands trembling as she reached for his arm. The human, still caught in the shock of meeting an alien, pulled away slightly, his instincts telling him to be cautious. But the desperation in her eyes made him pause. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "You have to help me. My mother, she's dying." The human stared at her, bewildered. He had no idea what was going on. He had crash-landed here by accident, a mere traveler in a strange world, and now this girl was pleading with him as if he were her savior. "My mother will die if you don't help. Please, she's the last one of her kind," she cried out, her voice cracking under the weight of her words. Her face contorted in pain, the thought of losing her only family pushing her to the edge of sanity. "You're the only one who can save her." The human blinked, his mind racing. This was unreal. A girl from another world begging for his help. He could see the genuine fear in her eyes, the way her hands clutched at him as if he were the last lifeline she had. But why him? Why did she think he, a mere stranger, could do anything to save her mother? "Wait," the human said, holding up a hand. "Slow down, I don't understand. What are you talking about?" The girl's eyes widened and she grabbed his hands, squeezing them tightly. "My mother is sick," she explained, her voice desperate, almost frantic. "Only a human can cure her. Please, you have to help her. I can't lose her. She's everything I have." The human felt a pang of sympathy. He could see how much this meant to her, the way her voice broke as she spoke of her mother. But his confusion only grew. "What kind of sickness?" he asked cautiously. "What makes you think I can help?" The girl stepped back slightly, her head lowered in sorrow. She took a deep breath, gathering herself before speaking again. "It's a disease," she said quietly. "A rare one, only found on my planet. My mother, she was chosen to carry this burden. She's the last of her kind, and if she dies, my entire race will be lost. The only cure is the blood of a human. Only your kind can save her." The human was stunned. Blood of a human? Was she serious? It sounded like something out of a story, some far-fetched myth. But the girl's desperation was real. The way she looked at him with eyes full of fear and hope was enough to make him wonder if this wasn't just some strange, twisted game. "What are you asking me to do?" he said, his voice low and cautious. "How can I help?" The girl's eyes filled with fresh tears, and she stepped closer, placing her hands over his. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've tried everything. Nothing else works. You're my last hope." She paused, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "Please, you have to help me. Please save my mother. If you don't, she'll die, and I'll be alone." The human swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He could see the sincerity in her face, the desperation that clung to her every movement. She was asking for something impossible, but how could he turn his back on her? The moment stretched on, the tension thick in the air. The girl stood there holding his hands tightly, her body trembling with emotion. The human looked around at the barren landscape, the world that seemed so indifferent to their suffering. He thought about his own life, about his journey, about everything he had been through to get here. Could he really help her? Was it even possible to save her mother with nothing more than the blood of a stranger? He didn't know, but one thing was certain: he couldn't just walk away. "I'll help you," he said finally, his voice firm. "I don't know if I can save your mother, but I'll try." The girl's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Her hands tightened around his, and she pulled him closer. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As she spoke, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the alien world in shadows. But in that moment, a new light began to shine, one born from a desperate plea and the willingness to take a chance. The human had made his choice. There was no turning back now. The human stood still, staring at the alien girl who had placed all her trust in him, as though he were her last hope. Her hands were still tightly gripping his, her desperate eyes pleading with him to make a choice that would determine the fate of her mother, and possibly her entire race. Yet, despite the weight of her words, the human couldn't shake the uncertainty that gripped him. He had just stumbled into this strange, desolate world by accident, a crash landing that had shattered his ship, leaving him stranded with no way to communicate or escape. The last thing he expected was to be asked for help, let alone for something so far beyond his understanding. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of it all. "This can't be real," he muttered under his breath, pulling his hands back slowly from the girl's grasp. "I don't even know you. I don't know anything about your world. How can I help? I'm just a human." The girl's face faltered for a moment, as if his rejection had struck her deeply, but she quickly regained her composure. "You are the only one who can help," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, I don't know where else to turn." His gaze shifted, scanning the landscape around them, his thoughts a whirlwind. She was asking for something impossible. How could a stranger, a human who had no medical knowledge, save someone with an alien disease? He wasn't even sure how to survive in this hostile environment. The sun was setting, the temperature was dropping fast, and he had no idea what else this world had in store for him. Was he really willing to risk his life for someone he barely knew? "I don't even know what's going on here," the human continued, shaking his head. "You're asking me to do something I don't understand. I don't even know how to help." The girl stepped closer, her eyes wide with urgency. "You don't have to understand. You just have to trust me. I'm not asking for much. All I need is your help to save her. She's all I have left. If you don't help, I will lose everything." The human could feel the weight of her words pressing on him. He had spent his entire life running from things, from responsibilities, from hard decisions. It was easier that way. But now, standing before this alien girl, her entire future hanging in the balance, he couldn't ignore the pull of her plea. Something inside him stirred. A flicker of humanity. The same humanity that had once driven him to help others, even when he didn't want to. He looked down at her, her small, fragile frame trembling with fear and hope. Her face was a mixture of pain, fear, and desperation. But there was also a glimmer of trust in him, the very person who had just walked into her world. She believed that he could save her mother, but was he ready to take that leap? "I don't even know if I can help you," he said again, this time more softly. "I've never done anything like this before. I don't know what you're asking of me, but it feels dangerous. How do I even know I'm not making everything worse?" The girl swallowed hard, her eyes filling with fresh tears. "If you don't try, then we'll never know. Please, you have to believe me." She stepped back, releasing his hands and taking a step toward her mother's location, as if she was giving him space to make his decision. The human watched her go, her small form retreating into the distance. He could see her shoulders shake as she tried to gather her strength, the fear still written all over her face. She had no one else. She had placed her trust in him, and now he was the only one who could do anything to help. The human exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man, trying to survive in a world he didn't understand. He didn't have the answers. He didn't even know if he had the courage to do what she was asking of him. There was too much unknown, too many risks. He had lived through dangerous situations before, but this was different. This wasn't a battle he could fight with a weapon. This wasn't something he could solve with strength or skill. It was about trusting a stranger and putting his own life on the line. And yet, despite all the fear and uncertainty, something deep within him began to shift. It was a quiet feeling, barely noticeable at first, but it grew stronger with every passing moment. The girl was right. If he walked away now, if he refused to help, he would never know what could have been. He could continue down his path of isolation, avoiding risks, avoiding responsibility. But something about her plea, her courage in the face of so much pain, reached into him, forcing him to confront the person he wanted to be. He had never been one for deep connections or emotional attachments. Life had taught him to keep his distance, to focus on his survival. But maybe it was time to change that. Maybe it was time to step outside of his own fears and take a chance. The girl had risked everything by asking him for help. Now it was his turn to decide whether he was willing to do the same. Taking a deep breath, the human started walking toward her. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, heavy but undeniable. He didn't have the answers. He didn't know how this would end. But one thing was clear. He couldn't let her face this alone. Not when it was clear that her world and her mother's life depended on him. "All right," he said quietly, his voice steadying with determination. "I'll help you." The girl turned to face him, her face lighting up with a mix of hope and disbelief. "You will?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was filled with a joy that seemed impossible after the darkness of their conversation. "Yes," the human replied, his gaze steady. "I don't know how, but I will help. Lead me to your mother." With those words, he had made his choice. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt that he was finally making the right decision. The tension that had gripped him began to ease, replaced by a new sense of purpose. This world, this alien planet, was filled with danger and unknowns. But in this moment, the human knew that his decision to help this girl and her mother could change everything. Together they would face whatever came next. The desert winds howled as if the world itself was holding its breath. The human and the alien girl walked side by side, their footsteps crunching against the dry earth. It felt like a long journey despite the short distance to the girl's home. The human's mind raced with 1,000 questions. He had made the choice to help her, but now as they approached the small alien dwelling, uncertainty loomed in the air. "What happens if this doesn't work?" the human asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. He wasn't sure what he was getting himself into. The girl walking ahead of him glanced back and gave him a soft, reassuring smile. "It has to work," she said simply. "If it doesn't, I don't know what will happen. My mother will die." The human's stomach twisted at her words. He had heard stories about the frailty of alien species, their susceptibility to strange diseases. But this was different. This was real. The life of an alien mother, and by extension the life of her entire race, rested on his willingness to help. His mind couldn't fully comprehend the weight of the situation, but his heart seemed to understand. Something inside him told him that he couldn't walk away now. They reached a small rocky hut made of metal and stone, nestled against the backdrop of jagged cliffs. The girl led him inside, her movements quick and anxious. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of strange herbs and medicines. In the center of the room, lying on a cot, was the alien mother, pale, weak, and barely conscious. Her once vibrant green skin had taken on a grayish hue, and her breathing was shallow, slow. The human hesitated, his eyes scanning the frail figure before him. She was unlike anything he had seen before. Long, silvery hair spilled across the pillow, and her large, luminous eyes were closed, the faintest flicker of life remaining within them. The girl who had been so strong just moments before now knelt beside the bed, her shoulders trembling with the weight of her worry. "Mother," she whispered, her voice cracking. The woman's eyes fluttered open slightly at the sound of her daughter's voice, but there was no spark of recognition in them. She was too weak, too far gone. The human felt a pang of sympathy mixed with guilt. He had no idea how he could help this creature, this being from another world, but here he was, standing on the brink of making a decision that could alter the course of not just her life but the lives of all those she represented. The girl turned to him, her eyes pleading once more. "Please, you have to save her. The cure, it's in your blood. Only a human's blood can save her." The human stared at the alien mother for a moment, the weight of the girl's plea settling heavily in his chest. His mind flashed to all the things he didn't know about this planet, about the sickness, about the ritual he was supposed to perform. He had never been trained in anything like this. What if something went wrong? What if it wasn't enough? What if he was making a mistake? "What exactly do I need to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl inhaled deeply, her hands shaking as she gestured to a small vial on the table beside her mother's cot. Inside it, a faintly glowing liquid swirled, faintly pulsing with an ethereal light. "This is the serum," she explained. "It must be mixed with your blood. You'll have to let your blood flow into it. The serum is incomplete without it. Your blood will activate the cure, making it potent enough to save her." The human's heart raced as he looked at the vial, the reality of what he was being asked to do crashing into him. Blood. His blood. He had to give it to someone he didn't know, someone from a different species. There was so much that could go wrong. His eyes flickered back to the girl. She was watching him intently, waiting for him to make a decision. The fear in her eyes was undeniable, but there was also an overwhelming sense of hope. The human took a deep breath and moved toward the vial, his hands trembling slightly. He had come this far. He had made the choice to help. But now that he was standing at the edge of it, the finality of the decision was almost too much to bear. Could he really do this? "I don't know if I can," he said, his voice full of doubt. The girl stepped forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You can. You have to. Please, I'm begging you." Her words broke through his hesitation. He glanced at the mother again, her life hanging by a thread, and then back to the girl, who had already lost so much. He had already made up his mind. He couldn't turn back now. With a heavy heart, the human nodded. "All right, let's do it." The girl's face lit up with relief and gratitude, and she hurried to prepare the serum. The human sat down beside her mother, watching as the girl carefully mixed the glowing liquid with a small amount of his blood, taken from a cut on his palm. He winced slightly, but the pain was nothing compared to the weight of what was at stake. As the girl poured the mixture into a syringe, she turned to the human. "This is it," she whispered. "Once it's in her, the cure will begin to work. But it will take time. You have to be patient." The human nodded, his jaw set with determination. He had come this far, and now there was no turning back. With trembling hands, the girl injected the serum into her mother's frail body. For a moment, nothing happened. The human held his breath, his heart in his throat. Then, slowly, ever so slowly, the mother's body began to react. Her skin, once gray and lifeless, began to show faint signs of color. The shallow, labored breaths grew steadier, more even. The girl gasped in disbelief. "It's working," she whispered. The human leaned forward, his eyes wide with relief. For the first time since meeting this girl, he felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. He had done it. He had helped. But as the moments passed, he realized this was only the beginning. The cure was working, yes, but how long would it take? Would it be enough? The girl sat beside her mother, her hand resting gently on her shoulder, waiting for the answer that only time would give. The night had fallen silent over the alien world, the stars hanging like diamonds in the sky, their light barely penetrating the darkness of the desert below. Inside the small stone hut, the human sat beside the cot, watching the faint rise and fall of the alien mother's chest. The dim glow of the herbs and ancient remedies in the corner flickered like distant memories. He could hear the occasional crack of burning wood, the heat from the small fire softly illuminating the room. His mind, however, was elsewhere, caught between relief and uncertainty. The girl, her name still foreign to him, but now familiar in a way he couldn't explain, sat across from him, her eyes fixed on her mother's still form. She hadn't moved much since the serum had been injected, and the mother's condition had remained unchanged for the last hour. There was no sudden miracle, no dramatic shift. The weight had stretched on, and the human could feel the pressure of time bearing down on him. He knew that even with the serum, it wasn't guaranteed. Nothing was certain in this alien world. He had made the choice to help. He had given his blood, made the leap of faith, but now he questioned whether it had been enough. Doubt clouded his mind, twisting the courage he had once felt into something almost fragile. Was he too late? Was it all in vain? The girl's voice broke through his thoughts. She's still breathing, isn't she? Her voice, soft but steady, barely above a whisper, carried a quiet strength that surprised him. He looked up at her, her face lit by the glow of the firelight. The tension in her features was unmistakable, but there was also something else, an unwavering hope that she refused to let go of. She wouldn't give in, not when it was this close, not when her mother's life was on the line. Yes, he replied quietly, she's still with us. A long silence followed. The girl didn't move, her hands folded tightly in her lap, but her eyes never left her mother. She had been through so much already. Alone, on a dying world, knowing that her species was all but extinct. The pain of that loss must have weighed heavily on her young shoulders, and now, in the face of her mother's near death, she was forced to confront the possibility of losing the only family she had left. The human shifted uncomfortably. There was no easy way to navigate this. He wasn't sure how long he could sit here waiting for something to happen. What if it didn't? What if his help had been useless? How long do we wait? He asked, breaking the silence. Will the cure work? How much time does she have? The girl's voice cracked slightly as she responded, her eyes still locked on her. Mother, I don't know, it varies. The serum, it's not a quick fix. It's a process. It's like planting a seed. The effects take time to grow, to show their full strength, but if she doesn't get better, if she doesn't wake up soon, we'll know. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the reality of what they were facing. He could hear the unspoken fear in her voice, the fear of failure, of watching her mother slip away. Despite everything they had done, the hope they clung to felt so fragile now, almost like a thin thread that could snap at any moment. The human's mind raced. He had seen death before. He had faced the darkness of impossible situations. But this was different. This wasn't about surviving a battle or escaping danger. This was about saving someone's life, about making a decision to intervene when the odds were stacked against him. It was about choosing to care, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. And it felt more dangerous than anything he had ever faced before. He looked at the girl, her face illuminated by the soft flicker of the fire, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. She had put her faith in him. She had trusted him when she had no reason to. And now, he was watching her fight for her mother's life, fighting for everything she had ever known. He had made his choice. There was no turning back now. But could he really be the one to save her? The girl's hand reached out, her fingers brushing against her mother's skin. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if praying, as if hoping that somehow, somewhere, the universe would hear her plea and grant her mother the chance to live. The human turned his gaze back to the mother. She was still, her breathing shallow, but steady. He couldn't help but notice how vulnerable she looked, how fragile she seemed. There was nothing heroic about her, just a mother, fighting to stay alive for her daughter, and a daughter desperate to save her. He had no medical knowledge, no training to deal with alien diseases, but what he did have was something that transcended that. He had humanity. He had the ability to feel, to care, to take a chance. Maybe that was enough. I'm not going anywhere, the human said suddenly, his voice low but firm. The girl looked up at him, her face showing a mix of surprise and gratitude. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not leaving, he repeated. I'm staying. Whatever happens, I'm not going to leave you alone. In this. The girl's eyes widened, her lips trembling with emotion. You mean it? Her voice was filled with disbelief, as if she couldn't quite believe that someone, especially a stranger, would make such a promise. I do, the human said, his tone resolute. Whatever happens next, I'm here. The girl's face softened, the relief and gratitude washing over her like a tidal wave. She had been fighting alone for so long, but now she wasn't alone anymore. The weight of her fears seemed to lift slightly, replaced by the quiet reassurance that someone cared. Someone had chosen to stay, and then almost imperceptibly something changed. The mother's breathing grew deeper, stronger. A soft, rhythmic pulse seemed to return to her body. The girl gasped, her hand tightening around her mother's, and the human watched, his heart racing in anticipation. Slowly, the mother's eyelids fluttered open. For the first time in what felt like hours, the room was filled with a sense of hope. A quiet, tentative hope. But hope nonetheless. The girl's face lit up with joy as she leaned closer to her. Mother, whispering words the human couldn't hear. The alien mother's voice, weak but steady, murmured a single word. Daughter. Tears sprang to the girl's eyes as she embraced her mother, her voice choked with emotion. You're awake, you're alive. The human stepped back, a quiet sense of relief flooding his chest. The cure had worked. It had taken time, but it had worked. And in that moment, as the girl and her mother reunited, he knew that this decision to stay, to help, had been the right one. It wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about saving the world. It was about making a choice to help someone when they needed it most, and for that he would always be grateful.